Important to note that the January 2024 Labour Force Survey is not directly comparable with the January 2023 edition. They changed the methodology, which means that we can't compare the numbers at this period going forward with past periods. So we've actually started over in terms of the assessment in terms of the labour market survey, and that's what Statin has indicated. They've indicated that they changed the methodology to make it more robust and to give a better picture of unemployment. In terms of the last thing I will note, which is something again which is historic and we always want to point these out, the Honourable Justice Marva MacDonald Bishop made history on Thursday last week, Thursday, July 18, when she was sworn in as the President of the Court of Appeal. Justice Bishop is the first female to ever hold this prestigious office, marking a significant milestone in the judicial history of our country. This appointment again reflects the administration's commitment to supporting the public service, women in the public service, and demonstrating a dedication to gender equality and the empowerment of women in leadership roles. And so we look forward to her taking up that role and to serving Jamaica in a very, very honourable manner. We also want to thank the Honourable Justice Patrick Brooks for his work. He's a man that's quite humble, but a man that is very good at what he did. And we want to thank him for his service as we have him retire from that role as President of the Court of Appeal. We're going to move on quickly to our presentations this morning. The first one will be from Minister Charles Jr., and he is going to update you on the recovery efforts. I mean, these are fantastic. You know, when we have an event like Hurricane Beryl that devastates many people, the question always is asked, how quickly can we help people? Can we help them? Do we have the facilities to help? And Minister Charles Jr. and his team have done a fantastic job. They have done wonderfully well in terms of coming up with a recovery plan, working with the Ministry of Finance in securing the funds. And so those who are affected know the government understands, and we are here to help you. And Minister Charles will speak much more about how this administration will be supporting every Jamaican who has been affected to get back on their feet. Minister Charles.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Minister, and acknowledgements to colleague ministers and others who are here, and members of the media and all who are listening. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security has been committed to ensuring that our social workers, volunteers, partners are out doing two things in particular. As I said before, one is to complete our damage assessments, which we are now 95% complete and continuing. And two is to continue the urgent and immediate response in terms of distribution of relief through items such as food packages, tarpaulins, mattresses, and other support that is required depending on the need. Now we are at the stage where we are moving now into the rebuild. And as we rebuild, an important part of this process is going to require us as a country to come together and to understand what vulnerability really means. We've been allocated $1 billion towards our efforts to support the rebuilding of homes that have been damaged. And we have defined, based on our JH Diner tool, a mechanism to make assessments of households as well as to consider the need assessment in those households. The JH Diner is our Jamaica Household Disaster Impact and Needs Assessment tool. That tool is the primary mechanism that we use at the ministry to assess post-disaster household needs and conditions to determine what the response will be. Now, I can't tell you how many messages I've received to say, Minister, well, I have minor damage. I have severe damage. The reality is, number one, we know that all are important. All are valuable, and we understand that regardless of your circumstances, if you receive damage, you are in need. But the reality is that $1 billion will not be able to serve the needs of the entire cohort of persons that have been impacted by the hurricane. So as a country, as a nation, we must focus our attention on those that are most vulnerable first. And so our priority goes there based on our damage assessments. We indicated yesterday, and I'll remind the country, that we've done a number of household assessments. To date, 8,397 household assessments have been completed, well, as of July 22nd, and we continue. By now, we should be nearing 9,000 household assessments. And of that amount, we have seen so far recorded 453 totally destroyed. And we project that that's going to go to at least 500. We've seen to date 3,221 severely damaged. And just based on our observations of St. Elizabeth alone, which we have not completed, that is going to also be increased. And for minor damage, of course, 4,723. A number of those households and homes have already started the process of the recovering and the rehabilitation that is necessary. But looking on those numbers, as a ministry, we looked on the cost index and the needs of the households, and we have defined categories based on the impact from totally destroyed, severely damaged to minor damaged, and allocated to each, respectively, 400,000, 150,000, and 50,000. Now, we understand that this will have to be supplemented, and so we are also cognizant that our partners from Food for the Poor, our partners from World Food Program, from UNICEF, from the Jamaica Red Cross, from ADRA, from the Salvation Army, and the other international assistance and diaspora stakeholders will also be contributing to the process of supporting this recovery. And I must tell you, and let us stop to acknowledge and to thank those that have already started, particularly roofing programs, where we have seen almost now 20-odd roofs being replaced, completely replaced, just based on the partnerships with some of these stakeholders. And I want to thank Food for the Poor and others in driving that process. It's important to note that we have international assistance that is going to be leveraged as well for victims of the hurricane. And I want to just reiterate two of the partnerships we have in this regard. With the World Food Program, the ministry will be working with the World Food Program to ensure that we can provide support to the severely affected families with meeting their basic needs, especially for food, over the period of 2 months. So priority is going to be given based on specific criteria. The criteria includes the level of damage to the household and to the home, the economic vulnerability, of course, as determined by employment status and other criteria, the number of persons who are in the home and those, if any, who are disabled, and additional vulnerabilities such as the age, gender, whether the households have elderly persons who are living alone, and such things. So those will be utilized to determine how that partnership with the World Food Program will be executed, and the actual benefit size is calculated once the number of persons to be assisted and available grant funds has been finalized. Additionally, we have a partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank. They have offered us technical cooperation for the following eligible activities: supplies such as food, water, non-food items, temporary shelter, latrines, medicines, veterinary products, agricultural inputs, fire retardants, among others, cash transfers and vouchers, the hiring of expert advisors and operating personnel for the assessment of emergency needs and of the damage and losses resulting from disasters, and the provision of technical assistance through their partners that they have, through specialized organizations that can help us in terms of the recovery, and also offering support in other areas such as mobilizing emergency personnel and the auditing that will be required throughout this process. Another important international support and partnership comes from UNICEF. And as you can understand, UNICEF is focused on our children, and in this case, in particular, emphasis on the children with disabilities. And that is so that they can return to a state of at least the normality that they are used to, particularly in the affected areas. So in that regard, UNICEF will be targeting the most affected areas and also targeting those children who are on path. And as they focus on those children, with a special focus on the children with disabilities between 0 to 6 years, pregnant and lactating mothers, what we will see is an intervention where cash and care packages will be provided to those persons who are registered with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities and those participating in the early stimulation program. So I want to use this opportunity, Minister, to appeal to all families, to all parents who have in your household a child with a disability. This is the time to register your child. This is the best example of the reason for us to have every single person with disability registered with the council, every single senior citizen registered with the Council for Senior Citizens. It is critical for us because that is what we will utilize at the ministry to be able to allocate support to you and to be able to identify you where you are. Before I close, Minister, I just want to indicate that going back now to the distribution of our emergency grant assistance for the rebuilding of homes, I want to just indicate that in this restoration process, we're going to have several persons reaching out to say what the damage was, how they were impacted. At the beginning, we had asked persons to ensure that insofar as it is possible that they collect information, take pictures, have something to establish what the impact was in your home. And those things will also be taken into consideration in determining which households, which homes will receive a grant. It is expected that we're going to get the supplement and support from the international donors, from the CDF that our members of parliament also have, and also from our local partners. So we are going to have to coordinate. We're going to have to work together to make sure that the support coming from the members of parliament and the support coming through the ministry's program is as effective as possible so that we can reduce or mitigate against focusing only on one or two persons and leaving other persons without any relief. The only way to do that is through collaboration. And so we are calling on all of the partners, particularly those private sector, churches, individuals who are going in as good Samaritans and now doing work. We ask that you reach out to our parish offices. Just note or give them the indication of what you are doing, where you are doing it. So that can be factored in as we collate all of the relief and the recovery efforts across the island. We want to make sure that we can stretch the billion and use it as best as possible, and that we can tell the country soon what is the quantity, what's the quantification of the amount of support we're getting elsewhere. Together, we hope, and it's our intention, that we'll be able to at least attend to the most vulnerable. And I'm sure that the communities will be able to support themselves and assist in terms of those persons who have damage, but not as to the extent of the totally destroyed. Lastly, Minister, in the category of totally destroyed, there's also the disaggregation of persons who have lost everything, but who have a particular vulnerability. So they may be elderly, they may have a disability, or some factor that increases their vulnerability. The ministry is also taking that into consideration, and there will be a priority in how we attend to those matters. Matter of fact, most of those persons are who we have guided our private sector partners to address first. In terms of time, which I know is a big question for many, we intend to finish our assessments within the next week. We intend to finish our data entry within the next 2 weeks, and we intend to start the disbursement of relief within the next 4 weeks. Thank you. Any questions?
Minister Vaz. All right, thank you very much, Minister Charles, for those big updates. I think it's noteworthy. $1 billion in support for recovery efforts and rebuilding efforts is a big deal. And I want to thank you and thank the team at the Ministry of Labour and Social Security for all of that work, doing the assessments. And as the Prime Minister has said, everything will be distributed with accountability in place. And so that $1 billion will go to those who need it. Before we take questions, I'm going to move on to Minister Vaz, who is going to give a quick update on the areas related to his ministry and burial response or any other areas that he may want to touch on. Minister Vaz?
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was actually here to basically answer any questions that may have arisen from my statement to Parliament yesterday. But thankfully, much of what I said has been addressed in relation to the statement that came out from the JPS shortly after my presentation, which basically was giving several customer concessions to customers over the next few weeks, coming out of what was originally their position as it relates to estimated bills. So I have not gotten a chance to go through exactly what they have said. My team is looking at it now, but I must commend them for hearing the cry of the people and the government as it relates to our restoration efforts. Obviously, once I have gotten a full brief on this and what it means, there may be additional asks of my ministry and myself, but that will be by virtue of discussions with the JPS management and board and shareholders who I intend to have a meeting with on this matter, and more importantly, the other matter of the restoration. Let me categorically state that as of this morning at 9:05, I have already heard from over 20 members of Parliament overnight into this morning who are still maintaining that the majority of their constituencies are out of power. So again, this leads me to the point of where the information that is coming out of JPS and what is happening on the ground is at odds. And we have got to find a way to make sure that we are all on the same page. We are now going into week 4. As of tomorrow, as today would be exactly 3 weeks since Beryl struck, and the longer we go, is the harder it gets for those without electricity. I also want to indicate that there are still several NWC pumps that are out after 3 weeks, and several NIC, National Irrigation Commission, pumps that supply water to farmers across the length and breadth of Jamaica. The farmers of this country cannot get back to earn a livelihood if they are unable to replant or unable to continue to water whatever is left of their produce. I am again calling on the NWC, and I will be setting a meeting for the first time with not only the management, who I've been meeting with several times a week, but the complete board of directors and the shareholders, to make sure that we are all aligned, and most importantly, that the directors and shareholders of the JPS are aware of the situation facing their customers in Jamaica. So again, I commend them. As they say, better late than never. But the fact of the matter is that what they did yesterday should have been an automatic response in a crisis of a hurricane. But give credit where credit is due. So I say that on the face of it, this that they have released is a start. But I would not say that it's a completion until such time as I get to delving into it deeper and get the real basis of the value of this and the benefit to all the customers in Jamaica, whether they have been restored or not restored, because there is no JPS customer that is not either directly or indirectly impacted by the hurricane. And therefore, we have to look at it in a holistic, wholesome way to make sure that all customers have redress of some kind. I noted that they have given a new deadline of August 15th for payment of bills. I am not sure myself that that will be sufficient time for people to be able to recover and to be able to afford to pay a light bill as a priority, as against dealing with what they need to deal with in terms of putting back on their roof or getting their livelihood to be able to earn a living. Again, I said I will be back in touch with the people on this matter, but commendation is due for JPS's action in relation to the new concessions that they have issued as of yesterday. So this morning, if there's any questions, then I would prefer to answer those, because I was very fulsome in my presentation yesterday, and as I said, JPS's reaction to my statement yesterday has taken much of what I would have said at postcard this morning. So any questions? Any questions on this online?
Good morning, Minister. Good morning, everyone online. I do know that there are two issues that members of the media had in getting here. So one actually sent a question and asked that now for you. The question really is, Minister, can the government guarantee that the JPS, or has asked the JPS, really that was the question, has asked the JPS not to disconnect during the next 30 days to ensure that while persons recover from burial, that they have uninterrupted once the power is back service?
So what I did see and hear in an interview yesterday afternoon from the JPS CFO was in relation to the disconnection, relaxed collections and disconnection. Recognizing the far-reaching impact of Hurricane Beryl on its customers, JPS has relaxed its collection and disconnection processes. The company has not disconnected customers for non-payment of bills since the passage of the hurricane and will continue to suspend disconnections up until August 15th. JPS will also continue to facilitate flexible payment arrangements for customers who need extensions on their due dates. Requests are being dealt with on a case-by-case basis, so persons requiring extensions can make their requests using the My JPS mobile app or contacting the JPS customer care. So I think that is very clear. The point that I made before is I'm not sure that August 15th, with a hurricane on July 3rd, is a realistic deadline for the relaxation of disconnections. And that's the point I made earlier.
All right, true to form, a quick follow-up then. Would the government lobby for further extension, and what about the telcos?
Okay, so absolutely. So the telcos were early out, and they already indicated their positions in relation to what they would do, and they would continue to review that as time goes by. So I expect that you would hear from from Digicel and Flow, and I suspect that after discussions with the JPS, you will also get further updates from JPS in relation to any additional extensions or change of policies according to the restoration time. Let me just touch on that as a last thing. And the bottom line is, I am very concerned in relation to the timelines that have been given by JPS based on what I'm getting out of the field from the members of parliament and residents across Jamaica. I already did my own survey on Sunday, and within less than 24 hours, I got 410 responses of persons who indicated that they were still out of power, and either that they did not see their names or their communities on the schedules, or they had not seen any JPS presence in their communities. After 3 weeks, I state categorically that that is unacceptable. So, as I said before, I will be having a meeting with the board, the management, and the shareholders so that I can assure myself that all of JPS's hierarchy is aware of the extent of the situation and that we need resolution now.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Morris Dixon, I'm as of next week, going to ask the media to actually show up and ask their own questions. Sometimes it puts us in an invidious position. But Minister, I will go ahead with this one. The question then is, what accounts for the disparity in information based on what JPS is putting out and what the MPs are reporting?
So that could only be one thing, and that is the information that the central office in Kingston is getting from the various regions. So basically what you're having is the JPS regional management that is feeding information into the control center, which is specially activated for disasters, which is fully implemented by JPS as we speak. So therefore, there must be a disconnect between the information that is coming into them, which they rely on because they have no other way of verifying it, and what they are putting out. And I am saying, as a rural member of parliament myself, I can unequivocally say, as it relates to Portland, that what they have put out there in terms of the amount of customers that are still disconnected and the communities that are still out of power is absolutely flawed.
All right, thank you, Minister. I see no further questions for you, Minister Vaz. I see one for Minister Charles Jr. And apparently there was some concern in terms of just a timeline for implementation. Then when the rubber hits the road, when then can people start getting their roofs on, given that 9,000 persons have already been assessed? When now will they be able to start implementing in terms of that aspect?
So, just to be clear, if you go into communities, you will see some homes already under construction, and you will see some roofs completed and some in the process of being repaired. As I said before, that phase has started in collaboration with some of our stakeholder partners. Secondly, as it relates to the emergency response relief funds of the $1 billion, that is being processed now. I had given a timeline of 1 week to complete assessments, within 2 weeks to do the data entry and analysis, and within 4 weeks to start the disbursement, which is what will be necessary for us to do that rehabilitation of the homes.
All right. Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank
Final question, Minister Morris Dixon. Since Minister Green isn't here, I think there's a question All right. So the same question really is in terms of implementation. When will farmers start getting some of that assistance? Mm-hmm. And the one coming in concerning the fogging activities, that's the Ministry of Health, really.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Minister, you can go ahead.
Thank you. And I think both of those are very good questions, and both of those are things we actually discussed in Cabinet, so I can respond to each of those questions. In terms of the Ministry of Agriculture, they had indicated last week that they would start providing support to our farmers, and the way they are doing it is actually reallocation of their budget. And so they are in a position to actually move very quickly. They too have been doing their assessments in the fields, and we believe in another 2 weeks or so you will start seeing that assistance coming to farmers. Now, it's very important to get the assistance to our farmers and get them up and running. I mean, for those of you who went to market on Saturday, you would have seen that there are many things that weren't there, and those things that were there, they were very, very highly priced. And so it is in our interest to get the farmers up as quickly as we possibly can. And so the Ministry of Agriculture is moving very quickly in that direction. In terms of fogging, additional budget was given to the Ministry of Health to facilitate additional fogging. And it's not just the fogging that we need. And so the money has been allocated and they've started to fog more. But also importantly is the cleanup efforts, because there are a lot of areas where you may have pooled water or you have a lot of debris on the side of the road. And it is important that we also clear that to eliminate breeding grounds for the mosquitoes. And so later today, you will see the launch of a Clean Up Jamaica campaign between the NSWMA and the NWA to get rid of a lot of that debris from the roadside and to just clean up all across Jamaica to eliminate those breeding sites. So we're looking at it on multiple levels. There's the fogging and there's also the cleanup activities that we are doing, and both of those have been, the allocations have been done. The Ministry of Finance has been very good in allocating money for these exercises, and you would have heard from Minister Clark yesterday that he has put in over $5 billion available to various ministries and initiatives to get us back on our feet after Hurricane Beryl, and those areas are all a part of that support that has been guaranteed to our ministers.
All right, Minister, thank you. There are no further questions online.
Wonderful. And so I guess all that's left for us to do is to wrap up this edition. I know there were issues on the road today, not sure what was causing all of the traffic, and that would have prevented some of the media from being here, but it's good that we were able to get your questions nevertheless online. And, you know, it's important that we do these post-cabinet press briefings. We are an administration that is very much committed to transparency. Media can ask us any questions. Every single Wednesday, we are here. We bring ministers here ready to take your questions. We have nothing to hide. We are working for the benefit of Jamaica, and we really want to have the opportunity every Wednesday to be able to tell you what you're doing and for you to question us and for you to keep us accountable in this process. And of course, as I wrap up, cannot say enough about the $1 billion in rebuilding support that is being provided through the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. That is a huge number. We have never been able to have that kind of support after a hurricane in our country. That is because we have managed the economy well, and we have these buffers and we have these reserves that we can call on, and insurance policies that we can use. And so we are doing government right. We are doing it right. And so when you hear $1 billion to help people to rebuild their houses, when you hear of the grants to our tertiary students who are the most affected, it is because this is a government that cares, and we are going to administer these with utmost accountability to the people of Jamaica. And so next week, I look forward to seeing you for another edition of our post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you all.